Boeing has not provided us with the documents and information that we have requested numerous times over the past few months, specifically with respect to opening, closing, and removal of the door, and the team that does that work at the Renton facility.
That is the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board ripping into Boeing for not turning over documents crucial to its investigation into that door plug blowout over Portland. She was testifying today before a Senate committee. As you may recall, an Alaska Airlines flight had to return to PDX in January when that door plug fell off in midair and left a gaping opening. No one was hurt, but as you can imagine, people were shaken up by the experience. The NTSB says the documents are important in finding out who is responsible.
There is one team that deals with the doors of 25 people. Why we don't have those names today, 2 months later, is really disappointing.
Investigators believe that Boeing employees removed critical bolts that hold that plug in place but did not reinstall them. So far, Boeing has not said anything about the accusations.